How does Tim Burton create a homage to the genre Gothic horror in his short film Vincent? Tim Burton is known for his interpretation of Gothic horror, being the twisted mind behind movies such as Nightmare Before Christmas, Edward Scissorhands, and Frankenweenie. But before his success as a Hollywood filmmaker, he was an unutilised artist working at Disney. His drawings were not considered Disney material. However, two executives saw his potential and gave him a budget of $60,000 to create his first short film, which he chose to complete in the form of stop-motion animation. The short film Vincent, 1982, is a homage to Gothic horror. It shows a child pretending to be Vincent Price, the great actor who starred in many Gothic horror films such as House of Wax and The Masque of the Red Death, having several references to his work within the film. The short film is a juxtaposition of a child escaping his normal bleak life into his dark imagination. For instance, when his mother sends him to his room, he believes he is being sent to the Dark Tower of Doom. Vincent is shown reading the novels and poetry of Edgar Allen Poe, referencing his work in Gothic literature like the events of Fall of the House of Usher, and even the original novel of The Masque of the Red Death. The short film was a successful experiment of animation in Gothic horror which would later influence Burton's specific style. Gothic horror as a subgenre has discussions of morality, philosophy, and religion, with the evil villains most often acting as metaphors for some sort of human temptation the hero must overcome. The subgenre was created through novels and became a popular style of writing, with famous writers such as Mary Shelley creating some of the area's largest hits like Frankenstein, where these discussions are apparent. As a genre, Gothic literature has been described as a symbolic realm. Frankenstein, for example, has been interpreted in many ways. Some say it's a symbolisation of humanity trying to connect with their maker, I ought to be thy Adam. And some say it's a symbolisation of women's rights at the time of Shelley's work. A more recent example would be Susan Hill's The Woman in Black, where it involves a powerful female ghost who defies the class structure that kept her powerless in life and who remains outside of patriarchal law. The short hints at many of these symbolic discussions that can be seen in Price's previous work. They reference the common motives. This is where the element of horror is emphasised. Gothic horror depicts these discussions of morality and philosophy in the form of a monster or ghost. Mary Shelley said about Frankenstein, "The monster is class struggle, the product of industrialisation, a representation of the proletariat. The monster is all social struggle, a specific symbol." Throughout Vincent, Burton has made several references to the symbols utilised in the work of his admired authors. Vincent plays God when creating Abercrombie, just like Victor Frankenstein defying nature from Mary Shelley. He also refers to Edgar Allen Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, when Vincent's wife is buried alive. Having its plot and symbolism also rely on a number of traditional apocalyptic motives. In an article discussing Gothic horror conventions, it is said that the principal allure of Gothic horror stories is the building, release, and rebuilding of tension through the creation of uncertainty, mystery, suspense, fright, and shock. For example, in the short Gothic horror film, Mother, Father, Monster, a man takes up a position as a butler in a seemingly empty castle and is told not to enter a room for his own safety. There is a constant repetition of building and releasing tension. 1 minute it's silent, and the next there's an ominous clatter of chaos, a common tendency for horrors and utilised more heavily by the Gothic to aid in suspense for a ghost or monster. Vincent was first written as a poem by Tim Burton in the style and rhythm of the Dr Zeus poem. It acts as a constant juxtaposition between reality and this disturbed child's imagination, going up and down through what is essentially insanity. This is how tension and suspense are created. Whilst Vincent goes insane, it is shown both visually and through audio. As it's a poem, the first line will be told as if it's reading a children's story, with lighter colours and softer sounds, showing a friendly version of Vincent's home life. Then the next will be transformed into a more cynical tale, with sharp organs playing and dark creepy settings, inspired by an older Gothic image. The contrast between Vincent's real life and his imagination is highlighted by the design of the mise-en-scene throughout the film. Within Vincent you see a large inspiration from a slightly older Gothic depiction in films like Nosferatu and The Cabinet of Dr Caligari, showing German expressionism. German expressionism is known to have uniquely dark and complicated stories, fantastical settings and set designs, unnatural and metaphorical shadows, and lighting and stylised acting. More specifically within Gothic horror films that adopted German expressionism, they have crooked and imperfect angles, long windy stairs, or bent and misshapen buildings. It helps to bring attention to Vincent's decaying mind. In the disturbed child's imagination, these tendencies are shown. He is sent up a long windy staircase to a room full of wonky checked wallpaper. Many shots are inspired from the scenes from The Cabinet of Dr Caligari. Another example of German expressionism in Gothic horror would be the short film The Scavenger, written and directed by Jeremy Ratzlaff, where an escaped circus freak imprisons a captive in an abandoned vault. It is a self-proclaimed homage to German expressionism and features its trademarks, like the shadowed lighting and the crooked angles. Thomas Fahey describes horror as having two elements, one being an appearance of evil, supernatural or of the monstrous, and the other, the intentional elicitation of dread, visceral disgust, fear or startlement in the spectator or reader. On the surface, none of these are apparent in Vincent's life as a child, until it is shown that his mind is quite a dark and tormented place, showing several indications of evil. The child murders his aunt, speaks to his supernatural dead wife calling from the grave, and creates a monster. These all produce fear, dread and disgust not only in the audience but in Vincent himself as he goes mad. Burton's films are full of abandoned and damaged children. Vincent's mind is clearly damaged and deluded. Vincent led on to be the inspiration behind Burton's next short, Frankenweenie, as it shows a child experimenting on his dead dog and bringing him back to life to create a zombie, just like Vincent's pet Abercrombie. This fits with Burton's fascination with the macabre, the championing of the outsider, and a fondness for classic horror. Within both there are common tendencies of the Gothic horror: graveyards with the wonky tombstones, the dark gloomy settings, and the obvious inspiration from Shelley's Frankenstein. Another being the obsession with morality, going against nature and invoking fear in the eyes of the normal. The Gothic invokes its own special brand of dread. Both shorts follow stories of death, grief, murder and the supernatural, prime examples of Gothic horror. Vincent is inspired by many novels of Gothic horror, for example the novels written by Edgar Allan Poe. Within the short, Vincent is seen reading his work and referring to Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher when Vincent's imaginary wife is buried alive, as Roderick Usher buries his sister alive within the novel. The narrator of the tale also reads a line from Poe's poem The Raven, as it refers to how a person's grief can influence their ability to be present in society. Both Tim Burton's Vincent and Frankenweenie were homages to Gothic horror. They both incorporated the key features of the Gothic subgenre that have been repeated so many times before. With references to Vincent Price's career in early horror films, Edgar Allan Poe's influence in Gothic literature, and the style of German expressionism. In essence, Burton's short work is a compelling reminder of an older depiction of Gothic horror.